I also will try maybe at some point touch a couple of issues or related to how to make designer run faster, but our main topic anyway will be related to application. It is important that when your clients or users open your page, they will see content, and they will see content immediately. In fact, there are different research which shows that if your content is not appears on the screen within maybe 1 or 2 seconds, the chances that your client, user, potential customer will not ever come there back are pretty high. So in your best interest to make sure that your page appears literally immediately. So let's start talking about it. And the things which we cover today is that how to first see what kind of problem you have, then to identify what causes that problem, then figure out how to debug if it's necessary to the access layer to pinpoint the better execute inquiry and maybe to fine-tune the query. So let's first talk about what really affects the page performance. There are several aspects to that, but mainly we can divide them all type of problems, all type of issues into 2 major groups. Because basically when your page is presented to the user, there are 2 things happen. First, when user type in URL or click menu button or any other button, browser sends this URL to the web server. Web server then executes the code, and while executing this code, it retrieves data from database, and we are talking right now about the data-centric applications, which is the specialty of the ISP designer to build data-centric applications. So I'm not talking about movies right now or any games. I'm talking only about presenting your data to the user. So again, web server retrieves data from the database whenever this database is. After the data are retrieved, those data are being sent to the browser, and the browser renders data to the screen. So basically, the steps of it is that how fast you can retrieve data from the database, and then how fast those data could be sent to the browser, and then how fast browser can render those data. All these steps of the on the way of a page to show to customer could be your problem, or could be, let's say, bottleneck. So let's see how we can identify this problem. But before we do it, let's kind of figure out or explain what type of problems we could expect. Well, slow running query. That means that the data are not retrieved fast enough for the database for the specific query. Or too many queries, also related to database. But not just that. For example, slow internet connection on the user could be an issue, and on the first glance, you would say, well, how can I fix slow internet connection of the user? Maybe he's sitting in his cabin in the forest and using his, I don't know, old, not 4G cell phone to connect to the internet. Well, of course, you cannot affect that, but what you can affect is the amount of data which being sent to the user. Less data sent, faster a page loads. And finally, the browsing, the rendering. So, well, of course, the speed of rendering on browser also depends on the user computer. You can control that, but what you can control is what type of objects you need to present to the user, and depending on those objects, rendering could be faster or slower. So let's talk about all those matters one by one. So first, we will be talking about the situation when your page actually renders. You can see it, meaning it's not timing out. Because this is two main different issues. Page renders but slowly, and page times out. You don't see anything. You just see page timed out. Well, we will talk about this situation a bit later, because there's certain things you would need to deal with. But before that, let's just talk about the pages which do not time out, or even if they time out, you still can see certain content. Because the worst case scenario is that you just wait, and then you see page timeout and nothing is shown. You don't know what's happening, what's going on. But right now we'll start with the just slow pages. So the very first thing you have to do to identify the problem is to enable application level tracing. Basically, the screenshot shows how you do it, but I will be always switching to the Iron Speed Designer, and I'm running right now the current version, which is 11.1, and showing what do you do. So here is Designer running. So what do you do? Right now I have some page, and this page is not really fast. If I refresh this, it's not timing out as I promised, but this page is not really super fast, so you can see it takes quite a bit of time to refresh and to load, and there's my data. It's some edit page from some table. Basically, for the purpose of this webinar, to show how page could be slow, very slow, and unbelievably slow, I am using a production database from our project, which is called bakaru.com. You are very welcome to visit this site. It's a very good site. This site actually presents some news based on your location, so your local news if you wish, and it has pretty sizable database with a lot of records. Suffice to say that, for example, in this particular table, which is a contacts table, this database has about 500 million records. Plus, right now I am connecting to one of the spare servers where the copy of database sits, and this server is very slow, so it's worse of the worst situation. But anyway, data you see could be really weird, such as like this. Most of the things is empty, but it's not our purpose to review the data. Our purpose is to see how the page loads. Right now, this is the whole page. Now, if I want to see what's going on, what I will do first, I will go to the build menu, and then I will click on the tracing and event logging and enable application level tracing. That's how we can do it in Designer. When you refresh the page now, you will see what takes time and how much time is taken by different queries and other objects. You can do the same thing, so let me scroll down, and here is the trace information. But before we review trace information, let me also tell you that the same thing could be done on the production application. Not necessarily need to Power Designer. What if you deploy the application to the server for production and it's slow? I'm sorry. Well, in this case, all you do is you go to your web config and you find the this particular node in the system.web hive or section, and say trace enable to true. By default, it is of course false because you don't want your users to see all this content. But if you need to debug already deployed application, you may be temporarily enable it. Also, you can see there is an option local only, which would mean that only a local user would be able to see, local host basically, would be able to see the tracing information. Your customers from outside might not see it at all. So when you enable the thing, you will get tracing. Let's look at the tracing and see what basically type of information it gives you. It tells you about every single object, every single query being executed on the page. So for example, I can see this is my first query, which retrieves all those contacts which you fields from this contacts table, which you can see on the page. And this particular query took 0.18 seconds. But then you can see another query which retrieves account companies, then yet another one which retrieves contact status, and yet another one which retrieves emails, and another one, email subscription type, and another one goes to source table, and another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. And you can see there are more and more and more, and I won't repeat the same words again, but by the time all the queries are done, we already spent 1.3 seconds. So the third question would be, where they get that many queries, and why all of them are running over here? Well, different objects requires to retrieve the data. In this particular page, if you look at the page back, scroll all of them up, you can see that, okay, of course, I've got those fields. But then if I scroll to the side, and in this particular example, all the fields from the table were included in the page. you see one drop-down list. Of course, to populate this list, we need to run a query. Second drop-down list, well, small one, but still a query. Third drop-down list, also small, but still a query. Another one, bigger, and it's a query, and so on, so on. I can scroll down and show you more and more and more. So that's one thing. Another piece of information you can see here is below all these queries. You can see when the page renders, and this is this is still query, 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 query. Scroll down, up here. Now, after all this done, you can see begin render and end render. That's where the page renders itself. The rendering portion took, in this case, pretty small time, just 0.15 seconds. It's also not always the case, and basically it's worth reviewing this information too. I will tell you later on why. Let's come back to our slideshow and start looking at different objects which could take time on your page. So, before we go and review the tracing, there's an important thing. The tracing information only shows your postback, only shows your initial load. I'm sorry. It does not reflect the execution of the page on the postback. That's how just how it works. So, what if your page is pretty fast when you initially load it, but when you, for example, filtered it or searched, suddenly it becomes slow and very, very slow responsive. How do we see what's going then? Well, the simplest solution is to make your filtered state of the page or searched state of the page the default one. So instead of clicking a filter and then selecting some value, you can always use a formal. So I just wanted to illustrate how designer can help in this kind of task of identifying what is slow. So imagine that your page slow only when you, for example, filter by certain field a certain value. So when you just initial load, first on record is fine, but when you filter it by some email, it's super slow. Well, you can initialize your filter over search control only for the initial load using the formula, which looks exactly like here. You say when page is being displayed, make it equal to something. For example, the URL parameter. In this case, in this example, it's email address, but if I go, for example, to designer for the same page, then in layout, for this particular page, which we have been looking, I have a couple of filters right here. You see filters in filter section, active status and company filter. Well, imagine that, for example, when I select some status, it becomes slow. So what do? Well, I will go to formulas, and I will say initialize value, and then put some URL here. Well, by default, Iron Speed Designer always initialize all the filters to URL parameter because it's the normal operation to do. Not necessarily you pass it, and if you don't pass parameter, it will just show all the values, not selected or please select or something like this. But if you pass it, it will set right initial load the value to the specific URL parameter. So in this particular case, all you would need to do is to pass the URL parameter active status with some value, when, and then your initial load would be exactly the same as the page after you filtered it. So you can, the same thing you can do, for example, with the search. So imagine that it's very slow after you search for something, for some specific value. Well, same thing. You select the search control, search text, initialize value, click it here, and right-click on this area and say functions. And then on the functions, you select the environment and then URL. So here I just need to say my URL parameter, whatever URL parameter you have, maybe like search string. So this will be the name of the URL parameter. And when you load the page, just pass the parameter, and then again, you will have initial load already filtered by this search string. So then you will be able to see tracing for this particular situation. It's a simple trick, but it's important because it's the very common situation. Actually more common than not, that you, for example, page is very slow when you search. So something like this. So now, again, as I just mentioned, in this tracing, you can see all this information together with the times. And you need to first, of course, look through the page and find who takes the most time. Like in this example, this is a query, but it could be something else, not necessarily a particular query. It could be a combination of queries. Or, as I mentioned, rendering, as I just showed before, you look on the time of the page rendering. So let's first go with the rendering because it's easier. And then we'll come back to the query execution. So why page could be slow to render? Well, first of all, if you have a lot of asynchronous elements, such as rich text editor, as an example, that usually makes the page much slower, and I actually will demonstrate the difference right now. Or another thing is images. If you have a lot of images, the page goes slower, and because, well, you need to render images most of the time, the browser does the following thing. Your image very possibly referenced by source. This is the standard property for any image control. And on the source, you have URL. So the common situation is that images are not coming from database. It could be, but very common, they are not coming from database. They're coming from other place and referenced by URL. In fact, this is a better design because when you render or save images in database, then they will be sent to browser at exactly the same time as everything else on the page, meaning that amount of information for initial load would be much bigger, and the user would be looking at the empty screen for a longer time. Better practice is to reference images by URLs. In this case, browser will first load other content, such as menu, the header, the footer, some text information, etc., and then it will go and load images. So basically, user will immediately see something, can read something. So it's not just an empty screen with the hourglass or, I don't know, rotating cursor from the mouse, and then images will appear. But still, it takes time. So now let me just flip here and go to the same page. As I mentioned, to the same page, here you did not have any, let me go up. Of course, it's built right now. You could see the green progress bar. It's built because I added a formula for the filter, for the search control, if you remember. But of course, I don't want right now to pass anything there. So let me show something different. 1 second. Let me make designer just a bit smaller so everything fits inside your screens. Just a bit smaller, something like this. I hope it will be good. So right now, and a bit, just bear with me, and just resize it just a bit so to make it more convenient here. Now, right now, if I scroll to the right, you can see that I have a bunch of the text boxes over here. And again, it was literally generated without any customizations out of the box. But these text boxes are normal ISP text box. And rendering time, if you remember, and if I go right now down, we'll see that the rendering time for these things, 1 second, it is about right here. Render, begin render and render, not really a lot. It's just 0.13 seconds. Now let's try to go to the same fields and use, instead of the ISP text box, let's use the rich text editor. And we'll see what difference does it make. So I don't remember exact fields, but let's say, let's change this guy. You see it's multi-line text box. Instead, we will change the type of the control. So where the type, editor type, instead of ISP multi-line, we will select right here, let's say default HTML editor. Okay, let's do the same thing, for example, for this field to make it, it's also multi-line. So we'll do the same thing here to really see the difference. And of course, it won't be a huge difference. You won't see minutes over there. But I just want to show that it still makes a certain difference. Web URL, I think it's also should be multi-line, right? Maybe, maybe not. No, it's single. I don't remember if I have anybody else. But actually, it doesn't matter. I can just say this guy also will be editor type. Oh, I need to first make it multi-line, of course. 1 second. Now I can select the HTML editor. So I select this one and maybe some other one, not many, but just a couple. Who is the good candidate for this? I'm thinking something with the content. Oh, country. This is our small fields. City, state. Others. Others is a good field. It's maybe long field. So let's do this, guys. And then see what our 0.13 will change. I hope it will. It would be embarrassing if nothing changes. It happens, though. Okay, I think it's more than enough. So let's go back to the browser and see what difference, what damage did I make. Of course, in this particular case, in the page with that many queries, the contribution from the rendering is not that much. But it could be different on the other page types. And everything matters in a sense. In this case, I just want to try to illustrate how much difference could make the change of the control type from the ASP multiline to rich text editor or back. So it's reasonably slow. I hope it won't time out. Really hope. No, it didn't. Very nice. So now we can go down and see our. It still renders. You see the scroll bar. Look at that. It's still rendering. Still. Oh, done. Finally, it's rendering. Finally. Now let's go down. Find our render. Oh, stop. It's too much down. Too much down. It's somewhere over here. Oops. And you can see rendering time becomes 1.9 seconds. It was 0.13. So just changing 3 controls on this table to be rich text editor brought the timing of the render time. Oh, now it's just rendered. It's just finished. So it brought it to 2 seconds. In fact, it's more than 2 seconds because if we go carefully look at the timing, it's you actually you care from the time when it's end load. This is the database completed right here, and then from here we actually render. You can see that it's 1.1, 1.4, and 1.9. So combined rendering time right here on the right hand side. You can see right now it's like 5 seconds. So it's very slow. So this is an important thing, and a lot of times people do not think they want to have it pretty. Pretty is good, don't get me wrong, but you need to always kind of think that how many of the pretty controls you want to be on same page. Of course, this example is a bit not realistic because I put 5 rich text editors on the editable table. So effectively it's 5 times 10 rows at 50. Well, my suggestion not to use rich text editor ever in the table controls when it's repeated by rows, because each row kind of renders its own copy. This is suggestion number 1. Suggestion number 2, use more efficient rich text editor. So ASP multiline is always more efficient because it's very simple control. It just renders bigger space, nothing else. While rich text editor loads its menus, it loads the styles, and so on, so on. Also, not all editors are created equal, such as, for example, Qt editor, which is also available as an option in the Iron Speed Designer, much faster than Ajax HTML default editor. We don't make it default because actually you need to buy a license for Qt editor. For Ajax HTML, you don't need to. And the images, which also could make a page slower, the very nice thing to restrict the size of the image. Well, when you specify the exact size on the page, it renders faster because browser knows how much space it needs to create for this image. And also, it really helps to store your images in the thumbnails smaller size. You don't want to show anyway on your page the 1000 by 2000 pixels image anyway. It will be too huge for a page. So if you show a smaller image, well, resize it on the place where the image itself is stored and show the thumbnail, because that will reduce the amount of information you send over the internet. And again, that addresses the question of the dude who is in the forest. If you will send him huge images but show only a small thumbnail after resizing, he won't be happy. He still feels the very small image, but the time to load the page is huge. So make a thumbnails. Now, another important thing is the which server you're using to host your website. Starting with the Windows Server 2008 and newer, all IIS, I think starting with IIS IS7 if I remember correctly, do provide compression. So let me switch to IIS for just for a second and show you where it could be done. And a lot of times it's done by default, but if it's not done by default, then you should do this. So let's where's my IIS here? I don't remember. Let me do this. Well, here it is. So for the application, for example, any application, doesn't matter. When you see application, there's a compression node right here. So make sure that in the compression node you enable compression. This actually can cut the size of the amount of bytes you really send to the browser by a factor of like 5 or 10. It could be huge help. So let's go back here. Finally, important thing. What objects are you rendering? Except the editors, which is easy to spot, you might have images like on image buttons. So each button might have a small image. Well, imagine that. Even the small images take time. So the much faster way to do is not to use the image buttons, but use a style sheet instead. Fortunately, IronSpeed Designer for all modern themes almost do not use any images. All the buttons is actually created using the style sheet. And I'm not talking about the pictogram on top of a button like Excel, for example, a symbol or something like this. I'm talking about the round edges of buttons or shadows or this type of things. So that's both about the rendering. Look for bigger objects, look for images, don't put too many HText editors. It was the easy part. Now the more tricky part, what to do if the query is slow. Well, first of all, let's talk about the single query, because also the other question is a lot of queries. So why the single query could be slow? Well, the reasons are pretty simple. Very possible your index is not created at all, or it's not a proper index. Let me go a bit on a tangent and for 5 minutes or maybe less and talk about indexes, because this is a very important thing. And of course, I could not cover and teach you right now in 2 or 3 minutes how to properly create indexes. It's a big subject, subject for the separate webinar or more. But there are several simple guidelines here you can follow. So guideline number 1, your index field, basically index consists from these 3 parts. And let me just switch to the SQL Server Management Studio and show you the index. So for example, this context table which we have been just looking at has a bunch of different indexes. And let's look at any of them, doesn't matter which one. For example, let's look at this guy. I think it's the index which will show me what I want. Okay, so we can see the index here. It has 3 parts. First, the fields which are actually indexed. Then the bunch of payload fields are included in the index. So they are not indexed by, so they are not in the tree, they are not sorted, but they are included to those index fields. And then there are where condition on the bottom. So what does it mean? Well, let's start with the where condition. Do you need it at all? Well, it's very useful if, for example, you only show customers in the United States. Let's say you have this was this. So 99 people, 0.9% of people look only customers in the United States. You don't care about anybody else. Well, in this case, you can include in the index condition that country should be equal to the United States. It immediately, without increasing the size of the index or any performance of its maintenance, cuts actually it cuts the size of the index very much. So it becomes faster and smaller, which is great. Now let's go for the first portion. What are these fields doing here? Well, these are the fields which are either in your where clause or order by. So basically, this is the fields which you search or filter by, and these are the fields you sorting by. So anything you want to sort, order by, or you want to filter by have to be here, because that what allows the SQL Server or any other database, it doesn't matter, the same situation with Oracle, MySQL, you name it, to quickly find the records you need. And finally, what this include is doing here? Well, that's the deal. If you include all these fields you need to retrieve in the index as include, don't include them here, because that will increase the size of the index tremendously and the index becomes unmanageable. Include them here. This doesn't include the size of the image index that much, but it allows not to go to the tables at all, but retrieve all information from the index. Of course, it's not always possible. Maybe you have, for example, binary fields or image fields. You can't include them here. So then you don't have a choice. You don't need to include them. Just use the sorting portion and the maybe restricted portion if this is your conditions. But if you're just retrieving the fields which are not blobs, not binary, not end text, and not images, then making index which includes those fields could make things faster, like 100 times, 1,000 times. Because really, you only retrieve information from index. You don't need to go to underlying table and retrieve all the fields. Now, the order of these fields in this top portion is also important. The general rule of thumb, and of course, there are always exceptions to any rule of thumb on the queries and indexes, and actually the any database science. It's not a science really. It's just a try and error thing mostly. So there's exceptions maybe are more than the rules, but still there's a rule of thumb. Then of those two fields, the first you order them in the order of selectivity. What I mean is that, for example, you could field which has only like 5 values in your database, such as like status, 2 values, active, not active, or maybe like, I don't know, gender, male, female, or something like this. If you have a limited number of values, its selectivity is very small, meaning that for each of those values you have a lot of records in database. So you put those fields with the less selectivity towards to the end, down, and those which is a bigger selectivity to the top. For example, email address is the field with a huge selectivity because almost every context has different email. Well, there could be situations when one email belongs to 2 or 3 contexts, could be, in a sense, like, for example, sales@imsp.com, this email could belong to several people in the sales department. However, generally, it's very selective field. So put the most selective fields on top, put the least selective to the bottom in this list of the fields you put in the index. Also, there are exceptions to this rule, and you need to try it. So how do you try it? Before I go back to my presentation, you run your query. For example, if it is SQL Server, it's very convenient. If it's Oracle, it could be different and less convenient. But in any for any database, there are usually some kind of management tool, like Management Studio for the SQL Server. In SQL Server, when you run your query, you can, for example, I can see the query right here. For example, I run this query right now. To see the path and how it's executed, what indexes are used, all I need to do is to click on this button. You see, include actual execution plan. The same thing could be done in Control-M, or the same thing could be done using the menu, the query menu, include actual execution plan, either way. But now, when I run this thing, and this query actually usually runs for like 15-20 seconds on this database, again, as I said, pretty sizable database. But when it finishes, I can go and look what was the execution plan. Another kind of useful thing to do over here is actually to add statistics I or on and statistics time on and statistics I or off and statistics time off. So right now you can see that my query executed one thing, and then there's my plan. What I'm looking here is that I only want to see indexes. I don't want my query to go to database ideally, and ideally the index should be seek. So this is what my index seek is doing here. But here I have index scan. So I would worry, but I can see that the cost of it is just 10% really. Well, of course, I might be tempted tempted to change this index the way that it will do only seek, but again, it depends. In this particular situation, that won't actually achieve the thing, because right now they both sorted the same basically way, and my merge is very fast. If I would change this particular index to make it 6, so I would reverse the fields, then it might suddenly, instead of merge join, it will might go to other join, like hash join. It will become pretty slow. But again, as I said, it depends. I would not go into big details. There are a lot of details to look for, but technically, with indexing, you are shooting for the usage of index, and you're shooting for the seek of this index. So let me go back. So that's my small detour into the indexing. So you make sure that your fields are indexed, and you make sure that the index is proper. Next thing is the page size. Well, how many records do you retrieve? If you retrieve 100, it will be slower than retrieving 10. So if your page is already slow, you might consider to limiting your page size. Make it smaller, make it 10 records. Now, too many queries. That's the thing we just looked at. We looked at the page and we saw that it runs and runs and runs queries a lot, really a lot. So how do we can deal with this matter? How we can save it? Well, first thing, if it's a very large table, even simple thing like count, as you just saw on the query I ran in front of you, could take seconds, not milliseconds, but seconds. Well, the first thing to do is to remove the total number of pages from the pagination control. On the page which we have right here, if we look on the page itself, I don't want to refresh it, I just scroll up on this particular page. Let's look at the page. Again, it's not a good page because, again, it was specifically done badly to illustrate certain things. You can see there's no total number of pages in the application. It's done for the reason. This is called pagination control medium. In fact, it's default pagination control. The advantage of using such thing is you do not run count query, which could take quite a sizable time on the large tables. And this information of you basically can do yourself. You can change the pagination control very simple. I will show you in a second. But if you know that you have a table with millions of records, 100 millions of records, well, the information that you have page number 1 out of 50 million is not really useful. I mean, what do you do with it? You will go to the page number 45,387,485? No, really no. I mean, why would you do this? So it's not useful information. If it's not useful, remove it. How to change the pagination control? Nothing could be simpler. You just go to the page, and in the table control, you find the pagination, and here's the pagination control. So all you do is you just select different control. Pagination modern, as you can see, doesn't have the count of the pages. All the pagination control sitting here, but for example, pagination medium might have, and simple pagination definitely does have. So you can select pagination with the number or without, depending on your design. But you can keep this in mind. Now, the last thing which you would look to after this is too many queries. So what do you do with too many queries situation? Well, first question is, why I have too many queries? Could be two reasons for that. For example, you might have a lot of table or record controls on the page. Remember that if you have a page with details, meaning you have a parent and details, and those details will be rendered inside the tab container, they are all loaded. Tab container is the client-side control, Ajax control. So regardless of the fact that you don't see those table controls, they're all loaded. So all the queries will be still executed. So maybe consider to splitting your page on the 2 or more. So don't use them, or remove the tabs. So for example, if I again go back to the application, and let's go to some page such as, let's say, edit pages. And let me select this page. So, oops, sorry, click wrong place. You can see these are all the tabs, and all those tabs in the tables from maybe potentially large tables. All of them take time. So you can remove some of them. Then it will be faster. Well, what if you do need to present this information and they are really slow and you really do not want to show them until you look at them? Well, then consider to using different idea. Instead of using the tabs, use, for example, the buttons, which when you click will load the control. You can change, you can include ICX controls. And ICX controls is different because it's only loaded when you navigate to it, basically when you show it. So that's one of the things you can do, but this is something to consider if you have too many children, because that could take a lot of time. Finally, they said you can make the page slower to make less rows to use. Now, except of the table controls, there are other places which affect, which can represent queries. Again, on the page which I showed, you could see there was a bunch of queries. Why? Because each drop-down list actually needs to run a query. So what do we do about that? Well, here is the beauty of the IronSpeed Designer. You have a choice of selecting what type of selector control do you use. Instead of drop-down list, you can use quick selector. Quick selector is much faster. So if, for example, and how to change the quick selector? It's very simple. On the page which we have been looking before, all you do is, that was the page right here. So let me go back to my fields. And you can see that there are a bunch of fields, such as like this, which were originally maybe drop-down list. This one already quick selector, but there are a lot of others. If I scroll to the right, I might see that these, so let me hope we have this, guys. Drop-down list, this is drop-down list, and so on. So what is the difference between drop-down list and quick selector? The difference is simple. Quick selector doesn't run a query until you click on it. So let me illustrate you what kind of damage or difference does it make to use one against instead of the other. So let me first go to this particular page. And when I look at this page, it's just show page. It's not even edit. It's a very simple page. But the filters, if you look at filters, it has this account company filter, which is drop-down list, right? So now let's go to live preview and look at this particular page and see what difference can we make. While I'm waiting for this load, let me just tell you one more thing about indexes. After you created a beautiful index and perfectly work, you need to take care about maintenance of this index. Of course, you might not be database administrator, you don't have a power for it, but if you don't rebuild and defragment the index from time to time, it becomes slow. It becomes so fragmented that really you barely can use it. So you see, we're still waiting. Unable to get records. Object reference, error, nothing appears. Well, why it is so? Believe me, it's just for one single reason. It's because of this particular one drop-down list for account company. Because if I go to this other page, which is exactly the same page, with the only one difference, this particular filter was done as the quick selector, you can see the page renders completely, literally immediately. That's how much difference a quick selector comparing to the drop-down list makes, because it doesn't run a query. So one of the things you can consider first, convert all the drop-down lists for any large table you use to quick selector and see if it solves your problem. If it yes, then you can decide if you can still you need to use drop-down list or not. Generally, if you have a large table, using drop-down list is useless because, well, you can show all the records anyway. So quick selector would be the better option, regardless of. But the difference between the load, you can see, could be dramatic. So how to change control to quick selector? Let me just show it quickly. So you have three different ways. So either you select the control, particular one, and change the control type right here, one way, or when you build your page from application wizard, you can click on the options and select the preferred selector control to be drop-down list or quick selector. That's your choice here. Or if you didn't do it before, or you already built the page and you want to change all of them because you don't want to go to each one, you have the third option. In the Tools menu, you have a Page Wizard. Page Wizard has this beautiful thing that you can go and say, convert drop-down list or list box to quick selector controls. And then on the next step, it will show you all the controls from your application. You can have a lot of them. This is all the drop-down list right here. And then you can say, select all of them, or select some of them, or filter them by, let's say, folder name. I only want to change them when, I don't know, it's a folder name, I don't know, categories or something. When it contains category, oh, there's no categories, what I'm talking about, contacts. So now I can filter them. So now I have only those which are in contacts folder. So, and then you can select them, and with one click, they all will be replaced. So, quite straightforward, quite easy. So, consider doing this to make things faster. That I already showed you how to look at the execution plan. I already showed you how to look at the plan. Actually, if you don't have an index, SQL Server will show you missing index information like this in this execution plan. I don't have right now example of the page without an index. Sorry, the example of the query which would have missing index. In all the databases we always have one. And again, this is not the purpose of my webinar, but again, when you run the query in question in the Management Studio and enable the actual plan, it will suggest an index if it's missing. This is, of course, really in relation to SQL Server, but as I said, for other databases, there are other tools which can do the similar job. Now, fragmentation, I mentioned, I just, in the presentation which you can download after the webinar, actually, we will send you after the webinar. I have some useful information. I just want to mention it before I go further. This is the query which will give you a result of your fragmentation for all your indexes. So you can easily see which are fragmented, which is not. Useful thing, do it. The fragmentation of the indexes, as long as I'm on the subject, is straightforward. You rebuild the index or create if it's missing. I already mentioned to you about the selectivity of the fields. You should target to sort first by the most selective fields. And seek is better than scan, as I mentioned. The cover and index where you have include fields usually better, although there is always exceptions to this rule. And if you have too many fields to cover, your index might become too big. And the too big of an index also could be an issue because your inserts become slower. So you need to kind of here to judge what you should if you try it and see what works best. Now the couple of things I want to mention while I'm on this subject is that if your query has OR, then use separate indexes for each branch. And if it has AND, use the covering index. That's kind of rule of thumb. What kind of OR could be in the query? Well, if you, for example, have the search control with the contains, it's very possible we'll generate OR query for different fields in the query. So all of the other things we already covered. It's a reminder. So now, important subject. When we reduce number of queries, for example, we removed our extra unnecessary table controls and we converted our drop-down lists to the quick selectors. Now we're saying, you know what? It's still full. What do we do next? Well, then now let's go back to designer and look at the specific pages. So remember the first page I was looking always at. Or for example, even better, I will go to this page. Well, this page which we looked was slow, so let's make it fast. But then address another problem. So first I will convert it to quick selector. Now this page will build and it will become much faster. By the way, the green progress bar means it's building. The blue means it's compiling and loading. So 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 we build the page right now. It's done. Now it will load it. Hopefully I didn't forget some other drop-down list, so it will do now reasonably fast. Let's hope for it. Okay, it's reasonably fast, it doesn't time out, it's much better now. But now the problem is this: how many fields do I have in the table? You see, it's pretty wide, and very possible I might not need all of them to show to the user. So I would need to remove some of them, and if I remove the fields, it will maybe become prettier. So this particular one, I already did this job. I removed certain columns, much prettier, maybe the all information I need. You see it's very compact and very nice. However, when you delete the fields, and deleting the fields or removing the fields in design mode is a really simple thing to do. All you do is you go to the field section and say, okay, I don't want that, or maybe I will select even some of them. Let me, for a second, make this thing. So, for example, I don't need these columns. Right-click, delete, BAMS, and repeat the action. However, regardless of what I do here, the query is generated. It's not getting affected. Removing the UI control, which is nothing else by label, text box, or something, does not change the query. So if I look at my query, right here, I click on data source, and this is my pages table query, click edit, I will see that all the fields are selected, literally all of them. And in fact, it's done because it's include all the fields. So this is default option, because we never know which fields you will put and which you would not, which you will delete, you will not. So all the fields are selected. However, the query is getting slower because you retrieve a lot of fields. Some of them may be very large. Like, for example, in this particular page, I know for a fact that the field called the page content, this one, page content, is a large field. It's a text. It could be like pages of text. So what if I don't want to show this particular field on a table, which is very likely my long content will be shown only when I dig deeper, open this particular record. So what do? Well, you literally do, as I just mentioned, you open this guy, go to select, you click on this thing, and remove the fields you don't need. Well, I don't remember which columns I removed, so I already have the page here prepared where I did it, and you just saw the page is much faster, but all what's happening is that I went to the step and only included these fields. So the rendering time of this page, by now they have the same controls, meaning there is no drop-down lists anywhere left. Of course, it will call build because I just removed the columns, if you remember. So that's why it's building. Now, let's see what is the total rendering time of this page. It's compiling now. So it was building, now it's compiling, then it will be loading. And then we will compare these two pages, which has the only difference of the size of the query. So let's refresh the page after it's compiled. So the total time of this particular page, and the query I'm saying is right here, it's got shorter, is 0.02. Now on the previous page, where the query is with the all fields, let me scroll down. This page is ugly, of course, and here is the query, and it's 0.07. So you can see the difference. It's 3.5 times difference. Well, of course, in this particular example, this query is fast enough, and the really difference between 0.02 or 0.07 is not that huge. They don't really care, but it's 3.5 times. So if in your real life your query is, let's say, 0.5, then 0.5 against 1.5 seconds is already a huge difference. So avoid select star. And of course, I'm sorry to say that by default, the designer will select all the fields, because again, we don't know which fields you need and which you don't. It's kind of your job as the developer to figure out which fields are needed and remove them, unneeded ones. Now, one more thing about this before I go to the Visual Studio, and I'm running a bit late. I hope you don't mind. It maybe will be not in 1 hour, but like 1 hour, 10 minutes of my presentation, and then I will take your questions. So sorry for this 10-minute delay. It's very difficult usually to, schedule exact time in 1 hour, but at least I will cover everything I want. So one of the last things before we go to the situation when the page times out is that DFK. DFK stands in our own terminology for display foreign key as. So what does this does it do? It basically goes to the parent table and finds the other value for the field. Why it could be done? Well, very simple example. If I have a foreign key, let's say on the, let me go back to my nice page to see it quickly. So see, for example, here, account company. What it shows me is some kind of text right here. In reality, account company is a GUID field. If you go to database field and look at the pages table, so this is account company table, but we are looking at the pages table, right? Pages table is right here. So my account company, that's the field, it's a GUID field. But what would be the reason to show the GUID? I mean, you can't remember it, can't memorize. I mean, it's long, ugly word like this, like here. So instead, a designer smart enough to understand that it's a foreign key. It points to the parent table, and the field itself is GUID, so let's find something better. Again, I didn't modify it. Designers decided that in this case, the best thing to show is last name and first name, done automatically without my involvement. Designers smart enough to search for specific fields, which are text, which maybe have a name inside, and then it selects them and combines them. So first and last name, means bingo, automatically done. So it will show these two instead of the GUID, which is much better option to look at the page, but it also can affect your performance. Most of the time, it doesn't, because it actually retrieves information by the primary key. So it's almost always fast. However, it's still something to look at, and if I look at the, again, on our queries below, you will see the query which we run against account company table right here. This is the query which runs account company table for our GUID. Of course, it's very fast. It's 0.03, but still it would be needed to populate those guys. This will be the other one. So this is something to remember, that if you have a foreign key, it by default will use some other value if this key is not really actually a text. So it will look for a text field to show, and it might take time, although usually it's fast, but in some situations, if your table is very large, slow, etc., not indexed, it may be longer time. So pay attention to that. And if you don't want it to be GUID, the easiest thing to do, if you can do two things: uncheck this thing, and then it will show GUIDs and no longer here. Or you can go to the page itself. For this specific page, for this specific field, you can always change the way how it's shown by say here initialize to, and then just type the field itself. Then GUID no longer will be applied. I mean, this display as functionality no longer will be applied. Now, one of the last things about the designer, pagination. It actually might have a huge effect. Designer generates query of two types to provide pagination. One of them, one type, is using row num, another one triple somersault. Row num generally is faster almost always, except the situation when you use a view without a primary key. In this case, row num is actually slower because the database engine spends a lot of time trying to index this row num through. Without primary key, it doesn't work properly usually. So for the views, triple somersault is better. In almost all other situations, row num is better, especially in large tables. So what do you do to change this? As the screenshot shows, or as designer will show you, you go to the database tab and select any table, and then here it is, paging method, row num, or you can change this to triple somersault. What's triple somersault, by the way? And what's row num, by the way? Well, I have here examples already, so I don't need to teach. So row num is basically like this. You select something from, and then you have this row number over. That's where row num acronym comes from. Row number over, and then certain field. Well, important, very important thing. This field has to be indexed. Otherwise, it's bad. Well, fortunately, in the most cases, it will use the primary key. Although, if you have page sorted by something else, this new sorting order will be here, because basically that's how your pagination is working. You're going through these pages. So make sure it is sorted. That's why I thought in the very beginning, make sure that all the fields you can sort your table have to be in the index. Otherwise, your sorting will not work. The triple sum solved is basically like this. First, you retrieve all the records. If I want the page number, so in these examples, I'm shooting for the page number 590,000. That's the number of the page. So here I first retrieve 510 pages. Then I sort them other direction, descending, and the top 10, and then sort them back. That will retrieve to this particular page. Of course, it's all done inside the server. It's not done inside the application. But even for server, this could be a big task. So for the large tables, use row num. It's generally faster. Now the last thing is, what if my page times out? That's the last portion of the presentation. It's pretty short, because all it will do, I will show you what to do in this case. Well, you need, in this case, you need to run, basically, let me first stop myself for a second and say, if your page timeout, 99.99999% probability that it's the query. It's never rendering. Well, it could be in theory, but it's really unbelievable. It's a query. So you need to find what exactly the query is. But if it times out, your query doesn't show because it times out. What do you do? Well, you need to run in Visual Studio. But you will need to debug your application inside the base classes. So first thing you do, you find your designer. So like in this screenshot, you see designer. Maybe it's a program files 86, iron speed, then the specific version, then base classes, and this is the project file. So first of all, you open this base classes in your project, in your Visual Studio. You do this like this. Sorry, not this. This. Open in Visual Studio. Here's my base classes. Then you just say rebuild. After you did that, it will build you new base classes DLL, but this DLL, and make sure it has debug right here. This is the important part. This is the project. It should be debugged. If you don't have it here, you can select this project type inside the build configuration manager. So, but make sure you build it as a debug version because you want to debug it. Or you can actually put this menu from the toolbox. Either way. After you rebuild it, what will happen is that your Visual Studio Designer, here's my Designer 11.1, which is running. After rebuild, instead of seeing picture like this, like it was original base classes, it becomes base class plus PDB. This is the debugger information. So this is the new base classes, and the date changed. Then you copy all those three guys and paste them inside your application. So my application was right here. This was Make-Fly application, and I copied my base classes right here. After that, you can also start. First, you need to close Designer. Close Designer, do that, start Designer again, and rebuild your application. Well, now you will have your application with the base classes inside, and the project file will be updated after you rebuild it, which you can debug. After that, when you did that, you go to Designer and click this Visual Studio button. When you click it, it will open your application. I already did it. Here's my application. Now I want to debug it. So what do I do? Well, for example, let's imagine that I am debugging the page. Let me make it just a bit smaller. And we're almost done, by the way. It's kind of the last thing I wanted to show. So, for example, my page, which is slow, is this one. Well, I know it's fast. I'm just saying in the sake of example. So what do? I will go here, say this will be my start page, And then I'm going to the page, to the control file. In the control file, I will find the get records. So what I will do, actually load data, I'm sorry. I will find my base page table control. You see there are different controls. You're looking for the main one, base table control. The row is not what you want because you need to load of a table. And here you find the load data method. Load data. Data. In load data, you will scroll down and find the place where the get records calls. So the important portion is get records. Put a breakpoint over here and let's run. Now when it starts, it will immediately hit this breakpoint. 1 second. And then you need to go inside. So you basically right-click on the thing, or you can do just F11, whatever your preference, and go inside. Here you will go to, again, get records and go inside. Get record list and go inside. And then again and go inside. So you will do this a lot of times. Eventually you will end up in the data access layer. I already did it, and I don't want to spend a lot of time, but actually I can do it one time. 1 second. So I will go here. Blah, 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 get records. Let me scroll from this. Run to cursor. And it will go here to get records list, go inside. Not this inside, but this inside. Another get records list, go inside. Here, run to cursor, go inside. Continue doing so. Here will be the same thing. You will scroll, run to cursor. Here it is, record, get records values. Run to cursor, go inside, etc. So you will do this. Eventually, you will get inside the data access layer. I already did it. Again, I don't want to spend your time. That might take 5 minutes to go inside all the time. What you're shooting for is the dynamic adapter. Could be Microsoft, Oracle, MySQL, etc. But it will always be something like dynamic adapter. And there will be method called get record values ex, like it is right here. You can see get record values ex. This is the name of the method. Basically, that's what it is called. You see, all my paths work like this. It will be called here, then we got here, then we get here, etc. Then we get here, and then finally we get inside this method. At the very end of this method, it's really end of this method, you will see finally this line. My command text equals final query. That's what you're looking for. Now you want to see your query. You right-click this thing, click watch, and here's your query. So basically you can grab the one, plug it in the new management studio, and then repeat what we did before. You enable actual execution plan, see what index is missing, why it is slow, look at the plan, and debug it. But the bottom line is to get the query, if your page timed out, that's what you do. You open Visual Studio and you go inside until you get to this stage. Command text, get query. And in fact, I think in my presentation, oops, wrong click, my bad. That explains where you get base classes, what you copy, how you start debugging. That's what I mentioned already. You go to get records method and load data, exactly as I mentioned, and you're looking for this particular thing, common text, final query, and then you're done. So that's basically everything I wanted to cover. I also wanted to mention how to make designer faster, but it wasn't really the portion of the presentation. And looks like I don't have time for that, but I will answer questions. And for those of you who sit to the end of all questions, I will give a couple of hints what could affect designer performance. Because again, it's kind of already additional bonus, not really the portion of this particular webinar. So the first question from Wilson. Those evaluating Iron Speed designer at my team say ASP.NET because of its use of potentially large state being passed back and forth is inherently slower than REST-based systems. Okay, question. I would not say this is true. I mean, it's semi-true, but this semi is it's not even semi. It's like 0.1% true. The thing is, you are talking here about the view state, which yes takes some has some size. However, generally, the size of your data which you need to pass when you retrieve any record is generally much bigger than the view state information. Well, of course, when you fill all of your text boxes, etc., they all started saved in the view state. But even if you use REST, you still need to pass all this data anyway, at least on the initial load. Well, on the post-back, it may be a different story. However, there is no magic bullet. You still need to pass the information between the server and your application, no matter what you do. Otherwise, it won't work. If you don't preserve your view state, well, you will have trouble because you kind of lost the value. You can, of course, preserve your view state inside the browser. Not necessarily need to send it all the time. And yes, on the REST, you might have the certain portions of the information a bit smaller using JSON, all this type of things. However, said that, it's still the main load is the information passed from the server to your application, and there's no magic bullet, as I said. You need to pass all the data, and if you pass in the big text, it still need to go. I mean, there's no way you. I mean, otherwise you can show them, so it still will go. And it's the first thing. The second thing. By the way, compression works beautifully on the SQL Server. And the second thing is, as I mentioned before, in real life, for data-centric application, most of the time is taken is by the queries. And I showed you on the normal page, the queries, as we were looking at this tracing, the queries take like 90% of the time, maybe more than this. So right now we're talking about how to save 5% from this 10% of the total load time. So we're talking about half of the percent. We're saying, okay, REST will make it 0.5% faster or 1% faster. Yes, true, might. But that's basically what all it is about. So not really it makes any difference. The question from Jean-Francois. How do I convert a table in the table panel to a table with the view detail below? How to convert a table in a table panel to a table with a view detail below. You cut and paste. So you basically take the table from inside, cut, right-click cut, then scroll down and paste below. That's it. Question. Does selecting columns in query works with stored procedures, and is it also available in the version 10? Not, I think, available in 10.0. No, I don't think so. And it is not. It won't work with stored procedures. Stored procedures you might modify yourself, go into database and changing them, and until you regenerate them, they will be as you converted them. But no, this is only for inline queries. I see that iron speed, and the reason for that, I'm sorry, is that you can can go to database and change the procedure basically. Just remove the fields you don't need, really. Again, until you regenerate the stored procedures, click special menu, they will not be replaced, so it will be fine. Another question. I see that Iron Speed Designer does not allow editing the query of a show page. No, it doesn't. But it does allow to modify it. As I said, it doesn't allow editing it manually, but it does allow to modify it. Because for any query, you can go to that query and edit it or modify it. You can change which table it's rendered from. For example, you want to populate this table from a view, be my guest, select here. You can, as I mentioned, you can manually select fields, whatever you're interested. You can add a where clause, more 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as many as you want, or geo proximity clause. You can add or change your order by. So you can change the query. You cannot manually edit it. Almost. because if you want to make a code customization, meaning type in the code, you can also pass where clause as a text, but that's the extent of the modification. Yes, you can type the whole query. The reason for that is the aliasing, which is involved in the query, and this aliasing cannot be done by you because it also includes in the different joins, filter, etc., is done on data access layer for table somersault, for example. So you can't really type it. If you control delete from the page, there are two situations. If the control is the panel control, such as table or record, then the query will be deleted. If control is the chart or the aggregate function, such as sum or count, then the query will still be present. So you can delete the control, but the query still will be there. You can delete it separately. Which paging method should I use on a viewing? Oh, sorry, on view query a table containing millions of records? On a view, the table somersault would be the faster, generally. Can I speed up authentication during sign-in? Good question. I'm not sure what you're talking about. What is the slow part over there? Retrieving the record from your user's table. Your user's table is so large that the record retrieves slow. Well, in this case, make sure you have index by the user ID, username, those fields which you select in the security wizard. So you need to index all these fields: password field, username field, and the user ID field. So if you go to security wizard right here, and select database security, you have these fields. So, for example, if I say that my table is, I don't know, I don't remember what table I have here. Well, contacts, for example. I don't know. I don't have a special table for that, but it is. The fields: username, password, user ID. If you use email field, index all of them. And so the fast, but generally it's fast. How do I optimize the where clause object with several clauses in point join tables? Great question. Now, by default, query wizard, when you add where clauses, it combines them with the end clause. So it's where this and this and this and this. In this case, the advantage goes to the one index, which will have all the fields which included in the where clauses indexed. So that's how you do it. Basically, if you have fields used in a join or in the where clause, these fields have to be indexed. Now the question is, which fields used in the join? Well, generally it's a foreign key. By the way, you need to remember that foreign key by default is not indexed, at least in SQL Server, I think in Oracle as well. So the fact that the field is a foreign key doesn't mean that the field is indexed. So you need to add index to this. But all the joins with the filters, for example, or the master detail, etc., they all done on the foreign key. So make sure your foreign key is indexed, and make sure all the fields in the where clause are indexed. That's all the questions I have, by the way. It was much less than I thought, but it's, of course, up to you to ask or not. But while you might be sending me another question, let me quickly tell you a couple of hints what to do if the designer is slow. Not an application, not runtime, but designer. Well, you have a couple of simple things you can do. So when a designer is slow, usually when the application is large or schema is large, or both. Large schema means you have a lot of tables or you have a lot of fields in a table. So what can you do? Well, generally we improve. The first thing you do, you get the latest version, because every version we get making faster and faster and faster. We always include new functionalities in the new versions to make build faster, to make schema synchronization faster, and etc. So it's first thing. But second thing is that if you have a large schema, make sure that you have adequate hardware. We recommend to have 8 to 16, better 16 for the large schemas, a gigabyte of RAM. And it's not a joke, it's really 16. So if your laptop has 4, you might be in trouble, because really designer has to scan all the schema to produce pages. In fact, it's even worse than this. It needs to keep in mind, or in its memory, all relationship in all the tables in the schema, and to properly render pages with relationship to children, parents, display foreign key as, filters, and so on. To cache the schema, you need a space. To build pages, code pages of course built in memory, and if you have a lot of fields in the table, meaning the table is wide, the code page itself becomes large. You have a lot of controls and methods to initialize those controls, so you have longer file which need to fit in memory, so you don't need the RAM. So for large schemas, many tables or wide tables, make sure you have 16 gig of memory. Another trick you can do is that if you know that you will be developing page by page and compiling them often, meaning running them often to see how they look like, you can start with the website, and later, when everything is ready, convert to web application. The trick is that when it is a website and you changed one particular page, only this page is compiled. I'm not talking right now about building by IronSpeed Designer. Build might happen for us, one or more pages. But, believe it or not, on these applications, compiling could be slower than building, because .NET, if it's your application, recompiles the whole DLL for all the pages. If you have a lot of pages, the compile is slow. Website, though, compiled at one time and compiles every page by page basis. Well, that might be faster. Of course, there is a but there's always but. But if the changes are affected to control file, which is an opcode folder, then you would need to recompile all the opcode folder, but still it's less than the whole web application. So that might be the case if you have lots of pages. It doesn't depend on the tables, by the way. It doesn't, schema size not in the picture here. It's only if you have application with several hundred pages. And final advice, what you can do is that if you have really huge schema, like standard SAP schema, for example, you have 1,000 tables, but you really use only 3. Well, designer actually creates a schema for the whole database. That's how it does, and there are reasons for that, a lot of them. I don't want to go right now into these reasons, but that's what it does. So if you, in this unfortunate situation when your schema has 1,000 of pages or 10,000 of pages, and you use only 3 of them, and you're struggling because this 1,000 of pages is a big schema and might take time to build it, to synchronize it, etc., what you can do is the trick. Take the scripts, generate scripts for these 3 tables, or if you have any parents, details, masters for all the pages all the tables you want to get involved, generate scripts for them and create a new schema with all of these tables. You don't need data there. You just generate a schema with these 3 or 5 tables, and create application based on this schema. And then when it's all ready, you synchronize. You just change the connection string in web config or in database tab to your actual database and synchronize schema. And that might save time. Of course, it's kind of a dirty trick in a sense, but it works. And in certain situations when you are struggling because you don't have enough memory, your computer is not that fast, the schema is huge, that might help you. I have a couple more questions. Question from John: are there any plans to provide ability to OR where clauses in query dialog box? This is one of the features which we consider implementing, but it won't be in the next release. Put it this way. What is a join filter? Can I help build clauses involving conditions from several tables? Well, yes, of course you can. And it depends on which query we're talking about, but let's say if we're talking about this one, what you do is you go to where clause, and for example, so we are talking right now on the pages table. We're talking about pages table, so let's see. For example, let me think what I will do. I can do this equal to, let's say, this, and then I can add another one where account company that appeared here because I just selected it. Let's say category ID. I don't remember all the fields I can use here. is equal to, let's say, it's called page categories, I believe, equals to this. Here you've got the join, right? So yeah, you can. I don't have any more questions, and they haven't been coming for some time, so I consider that I answered all of them. So I want to thank you for attending this webinar. I hope I helped you at least a bit, or told you something you didn't know, and your applications will get faster after that. So thank you again, and we'll be glad to see you again on our webinars.